So welcome everybody. We're on the hour starting. There'll be some more people who will, actually we're a minute past the hour. So let me explain the sequence of events here and then get the session going. We're recording this webinar. We request that you do not record it. We will, if there are mistakes made in errors in statements that are made, they'll get corrected before we publish the recording of the webinar. My name again is Rod Turner. I'll get into introducing myself after I've explained the sequence here. I'll be introducing Jeff and Tyrone, the president and COO of GATC Health, in a few moments. I recommend that you set your Zoom to speaker view in the top right. At least on Windows, there's a setting you can choose the view. That way, whoever's speaking will be prominent on your screen. Recommend that. If you have questions, please at any time feel free to put them in the chat box, and we will be answering those questions to the extent this is enough time at the end of the session after the presentations have been made. We have some questions that we've already received that we'll handle in due course if there's time. Chat box recording. Welcome. Thank you, Akash, for making all this happen. Akash is the guy that is causing this session to take place, making all the logistics occur. Thanks, Akash. Thank you for showing up as our audience. So my name is Rod Turner. I am the CEO and founder of Manhattan Street Capital. We help companies to raise capital via Reg A+ and other online fundraising methods. I am not an investment advisor. We are not, and I'm not, and we're not broker dealers. We're not underwriters. We're not valuation professionals. We're not securities attorneys. So we don't do any of those things. And I am not endorsing or recommending GATC Health as an investment. My role here, and I'd like you to read the legal disclaimers in the chat box that are already there, that relate both to the GATC Health offering, but also to my role here. I am not allowed to, for regulatory reasons, and I am not recommending that you invest in GATC Health. My role here is to enable and facilitate an exchange of information, to provide as much information to you guys in the audience as is feasibly possible in this session without bias. Although we have bias, there's a severe conflict of interest because we stand to make up to $1.9 million by our estimation in this Reg A+ offering. So that's a huge conflict of interest, right? And we own 1.5% approximately of GATC Health, which gives us more reason to be in a potential conflict with your interests. So do not consider me to be an unbiased person, although I'm doing my best, and I will do my best in this session not to be biased. Okay, that is a very, very important part of this journey. So, okay, so I'd like to introduce Tyrone, who is the Chief Operating Officer of GATC Health. Please, in a moment, I'll pass the baton over to him, and also to Jeff Owens, who is the president of GATC Health. Jeff will be introducing the company briefly, and then Tyrone will make the presentation about the company with a slideshow. And after that, Jeff will wrap on the investment side. And okay, so actually, Akash, I need you to put all the disclaimers up afresh for people who have just arrived, because they won't see them. New arrivals do not see the earlier comments posted in the chat box. So please put all of the disclaimers up again now, and again at the end, in case there are further late arrivals. Thank you. Thanks for that. Thanks for that pointer. I appreciate it. So after Ty has made the lion's share of the presentation, Jeff will wrap on that, and then we'll get into questions and answers, and I'll be facilitating that, taking questions from the audience and questions we've already received in order to help maximize the exchange of information here. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to pass the baton to Jeff, Jeff, great to have you here, and please do your thing.
Sure. Thanks so much, Rod. My name is Jeff Moses. I'm the president and one of the founders of GATC Health. I recognize several of the names here, so some of you will be familiar with both myself and the company, but for those who are not, thank you for taking the time to join us in this presentation. GATC Health is a technology company that specializes in advanced artificial intelligence for healthcare. What we do is two things, really. We use our AI platform to create predictive personalized medicine. And what we mean by that is coming up with new diagnostic tools or risk prediction tools to help identify and treat diseases earlier and more effectively. Now, that includes coming up with therapeutics, new medicines, as well as these diagnostic tools. The company is about 2 years old right now. Pardon me, I'm also hosting a little bit of a cold myself, so if you'll bear with me while I hack through this. But the technology that our products and services are based on is very mature. It's about 12 years old. When you consider that this AI for healthcare really only came into its own and reached its alpha go moment in 2018, you'll see that we have a huge head start on some of our larger competitors technologically. So that's really important to bear in mind while we're going through this presentation. We have a suite of diagnostic tools and predictive risk tools that are geared towards evaluating individuals' health risks and treatment options. And we have a number of new medicines in the pipeline that we're going to be marketing in conjunction with pharma partners going forward. So that's really the broad overview of what we're doing. The market is tremendous. The market size is gigantic. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to my partner, Tyrone Lam. He's our Chief Operating Officer. And Ty, maybe you want to start with how you ended up in this position.
Well, technically, I'm in this position, even though I'm in the same office as Jeff. I'm actually technically here because I don't want to catch his cold, but he's right next door.
Ty is very smart.
I'm teasing, but yeah. So I've been with the company first as an advisor, and then coming in as Chief Operating Officer about 8 months ago. I actually found out about this company through a company I co-founded called First Americans Health. We stood up a clinic on the Morongo Reservation, treating basically a fully certified clinic, reimbursed with insurance, treating right now, I think we're treating about 14 or 15 members from 14 or 15 different tribes in Southern California. And that clinic is still working wonderfully, doing some amazing things. Through that process, we were chartered by some of the tribal leaders to search for a way for the tribes to get ahead of the disparity of health curve that they had. And not to get into a long story about those issues, but they felt that maybe there is an opportunity to use advanced testing using genetics and other types of biological information to do a better job of predicting health risk using natural remedies to get ahead of that, and potentially pharmaceutical remedies to treat. I researched probably about a half a dozen companies in that space. The only one that I found, who just happened to be in my back door here in Southern California, the only one I found that could protect health information was GATC. So GATC, through that process they do not have called a B2C. They don't have a business to consumer relationship. They only work with other businesses. That could be pharmaceutical companies, it could be medical centers, it could be other health biological companies, and they retain the personal health information. We receive de-identified information, and that of course appeased the Native Americans, and that's how we created a relationship with them. So fast forward, got involved with the company as an advisor, and then I was literally blown away about what was under the hood. I have a background in predictive analytics through a company called Predilytics that was acquired eventually by Virgin Health. And then prior to that, a lot of experience in terms of online connected technology for behavioral health and health support. So that's the long story short. And I fell in love with the technology. I thought the team had everything that I wanted to see in terms of a startup, which is very fast, smart, quick, basically fast fail, if you're familiar with that term, do quickly, and if it fails, move aside and keep moving. And I love that about this company. I also like the fact that it's in the middle of this triangulated space of AI technology, this artificial intelligence technology, healthcare, which is, the trend now, especially for the younger generation, is to have more control and more insight into their health analytics. They want to know more and more and more. And then the third pillar that was frankly broken was the pharmaceutical side of the businesses, where pharmaceutical companies are spending way too much money. They're actually making less money, believe it or not, than they were 5 or 10 years ago. And the drugs are, it's a good subjective discussion as to how effective they are versus not. So that's how I came to be here. And that's really what I like about this company, is it fits in that sweet spot of not only biotech, but technology, and then getting into personalized healthcare. Okay, so with that, Jeff, let's go ahead and start the presentation. All right, let's just skip through and I encourage you all to go to our website, gatchealth.com, where you can see the most recent press releases, and of course, how we're positioning ourselves as a company. So in essence, GATC Health has two businesses, each in itself, potentially billion-dollar opportunities. The one that we lead with, because it is it's a shareholder's dream, if you will, is there a way that we can actually shortcut the process to get drugs to market, at the same time increasing the efficacy of that drug? Our tagline is the shortest path to better drugs. I'll talk a little bit about how we're able to do that. And we're actually in preclinical trials right now with a couple of drugs, which I can mention. So Jeff, let's fast forward the next slide. So we use this proprietary AI solution, and Jeff had mentioned this has been in development for over 10 years. So it's not like this is something recently developed. It's been tried and true in several different markets, and serendipitously, this company was able to partner with some amazing advisors in this space, which I'll talk about in a minute, who advised us and said, guys, you've got something here that's absolutely amazing that can go far beyond the use that you originally intended. So what do we have? Well, basically, if you think about it, if you're like me, if you're a Star Trek fan, the ability to detect whether an individual has a disease or what that disease is really comes down to the individual. So if we have the ability to capture information like genetic information, which is everyone's predisposition towards a particular disease, as well as other biological information, which is how is your individual body actually manifesting or not that disease, how is it treating itself? We've created this AI solution which mimics the human biology, and we're only aware of one other company that does this, and we've actually partnered with them because they have a different aspect of the value curve of our company. So where other companies are using AI to basically accelerate the old school ways of doing personalized medicine and drug discovery, we've actually revolutionized and created a whole new way using AI to simulate the human body and all of the billions and trillions of interactions that are not always obvious to science, would be obvious if we're able to recreate a human on AI. Now, keep in mind, the opportunity here is how do we try things out?
Ty, let me interject for one moment here, please. Jeff, if you wouldn't mind unsharing the screen when Ty's chatting like this, because I want the audience to be able to see him.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, thank you. And then put it back up when you need it back up. Thanks.
So the thing is that if we're able to use artificial intelligence to simulate the human body, we can actually find the non-obvious effects that a potential drug may have, that a disease may have, and that a treatment or a therapy may have on the body. And that's fundamentally what I like to say, this is inevitable. It's going to happen. It just so happens we're doing it first. So how do we actually commercialize that AI? Well, several different ways. One, we've already talked about drug discovery. We're going to talk a little bit about, a minute about how through this process of identifying the causal biomarkers in the body, these the individual biomarkers in the body that actually relate to the cause of the disease, not just the symptom. And once we have that causal biomarker, which we do very precisely, we actually find the right therapy, treatment, or drug that can directly affect that causal biomarker. The analogy that I've heard, which is so beautiful, is that there's a lot of companies out there that have a key that fit the lock. We're the only ones that actually turn the key in the lock to open the door. So we're able to find those non-obvious connections between the causal biomarker and the direct treatment therapy, or even a novel molecule that could lead to a new pharmaceutical drug, and connect those two together. So the first use of this technology is in drug discovery. Just to give you an idea, it's 10 to 12 years to get a drug from preclinical through the market. There's a 92 to 94% failure rate. You're talking $1.2 to $1.4 billion to create a drug. So you can see why drugs cost so much, is because so few of them make it to market and it takes so long to develop. So with a higher accuracy rate, with more information to shorten the preclinical and clinical trials, with more information to de-risk those clinical trials, because we know actually who can be affected by this drug and who would not actually be affected by this drug. We have a lot more information to go in eyes wide open with these clinical trials. And as I said, we have a couple of drugs right now that are in preclinicals today. The other piece of our business would be the therapeutics or the diagnostics. So think of this as us being able to work with partners, which we have several now. And these partners have direct relationships with consumers like yourself, could be patients, could be wellness clients. And by receiving genetic information, which is a cheek swab that this other company would provide, we would get that digitized genetic data. We have the ability to sequence the entire genome, not just part of it. So we're looking at everything. Everything is being disclosed. We combine that with information we have in our database, other information we could acquire or get through open sourcing. And then we have the ability to predict whether or not an individual is at risk for a particular disease or diseases. We can determine what is, or make a recommendation as what is the right therapy or treatment for that individual. And we can even determine the dosage and even potential side effects based on other medications that individual may or may not be taking. So it's getting back to that Star Trek, being able to, Bones going up and taking that little device and put it on the individual and literally knowing, having insight into that individual's biology. Again, this is all inevitable. This is all going to happen. We just happen to be the companies that are doing this in the best way first. Okay, Jeff, let's go back to the presentation. And we'll have time for Q&A at the end as well. I'm sure there's always a lot of questions when we talk about this. And I'll preface by saying I'm not a scientist, but if there's some scientists on the call, we can have a follow-up call with our scientists. Okay, Jeff, let's pull the presentation.
Yeah. Jeff, put the slideshow back up, please.
All right. Okay, and let's go back to the, yeah, there we go. So let's talk a little bit about our team. John Stroh, our CEO, 30 years in investment banking, very successful exits. He's also and raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and he's also been in the operations in biotech companies. You've already met Jeff. Going through the other members of the team, I think I want to highlight Ian Jenkins, who's our chief science officer, truly a genius. He is one of the co-inventors of this technology and platform. He was one of the very first guys in the Human Genome Project. We've had him in the rooms with scientists academia, Nobel laureate finalists, and they're blown away by his intelligence and the way he looks at things differently. Jason Uffins, our chief technology officer, who's building the technology platform that scales this science that Ian is inventing. He's had several exits as well. He's worked in very large projects with Grubhub, and also projects with the DoD. Preetam Wadhwa, who's our chief marketing officer, spent 17 years at Amgen, heading up worldwide marketing for several of their large drug segments. So we've got a very strong team internally. Let's go to the next slide. Now, our advisors, I talked about those folks earlier. We actually have several that we've just announced that are not on this slide, but I'll give you the overview. So Dr. Jonathan Lakey, who's the chair of our scientific advisory board, professor emeritus at UC Irvine. He's been with us since the beginning. He is a world-renowned speaker on all things biology, but specifically focusing on stem cell research and diabetes. Eric Mather, who is also our chief innovation officer, has over 100 patents to his name. Again, a genius in terms of genes, genealogy, and genetics. Dr. Jack Lewin has actually advised 3 presidents. I'll be meeting with him next week. We're speaking at a opioid abatement conference at Georgetown University. Dr. Stanley Lewis has been a chief medical officer of several pharmaceutical companies. So we have a very broad scientific advisory board. We just brought on Chad Beyer, who has successfully brought 2 drugs completely through the FDA process. So he's advising us on the FDA process. And then we have some amazing business advisors as well. Okay, next slide. The beautiful thing about having great scientific advisors is it makes the water warm, if you will, for other scientific advisors, because they want to work with people smart and passionate about a particular project. So let's talk about the AI gap. You may have heard of this. It's a term I think you're going to hear more about. Think of the AI gap as the unmet promises of artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence basically is taking away a lot of the human effort that's necessary to get from point A to point B. What's happened, and especially in the biotech industry, a lot of these companies that have been trading in, say, several $1 billion that are now trading at maybe $2 billion, is that they had their promise of using AI to close this science and technology gap has not been met. The promises has not been fulfilled, or they've overpromised. So what happens is where AI, basically, artificial intelligence, will take a project to a certain point, and then it has to stop, and then you still have to bring in the very expensive scientists, teams, to actually bring that finding to a conclusion in a lab. Very expensive process. Well, what we have demonstrated, and what we've been told by some amazing folks in this business, is that we are actually closing that AI gap much more than most, and to the point of actually closing the AI gap entirely, where we're using artificial intelligence to get to the point where other companies would develop, say, 1,000 potential molecules using AI. Sometimes it's 5,000 potential molecules. And they still have to find out 1 or 2 molecules that they can put into preclinical testing. So they're taking those thousands of molecules, still putting them in the traditional, very expensive.
Tyrone, what is a molecule in this context, please?
Thank you. So a molecule would be the basis of a new drug. Think of the molecule as that key that fits in the lock and turns the disease lock. So the molecule is it's basically it's in your body, and that's the thing that directly attacks or diminishes the symptoms of that disease. Thank you, Rod. Appreciate that. So by our technology, where others are getting thousands of potential candidates that have to be tested in the lab traditionally, thus the AI gap, what our artificial intelligence platform is doing is it's actually, and we have done this, is rather than thousands, we produced 4. And those 4 molecules, we have not only got 2 drugs, one for potential cure for opioid addiction, starting with fentanyl, another one with cocaine addiction. And we have found that the benefits of that drug in other forms could affect directly PTSD and other diseases, which we haven't announced, but other diseases that are the same neural pathways that we affect with our drugs. So that's what AI did. We still have to go through preclinical testing and the FDA trials. That doesn't change, but the time and effort it took us to get there, as opposed to several years, was 6 months, as opposed to millions of dollars, was less than $1 million. It will be less than $1 million to get to that endpoint. So drastically reduction in time, drastic savings in dollars, and much better efficacy of the drug. Okay, so let's go back to the slide. Okay, and down to the next slide. So the other piece we had talked about in addition to drug discovery was personalized medicine, or basically using individual human biology samples to predict their risk of individual certain specific diseases, I should say, and also recommend therapeutics for that disease specific to that individual. Again, this is the future of medicine. We're not the only one doing this. We just believe we do it better, and we've been told that we do it better. And why do we do it better? We sequence the entire genome, and not only the genome, we can take all the other omic data, so protein data. It could be epigenetic data, how the body responds to the environment.
Ty, when you say we do the whole, GATC Health does the whole
Yes.
genome,
Yes.
what is more normal in the marketplace? Because I don't think that's known.
Yeah, that's a great. Thank you, Rod, for that. So, for example, 23andMe. So 23andMe, I think they charge $99 or something like that. And what they do is they actually analyze what are called SNPs. It's an acronym for very small, already known bits of information within the genome. So they're basically taking little tiny samples within the genome, which is much less expensive to do. And based on these samples, they actually give you a prediction about specific things. As you can imagine, versus doing sequencing the entire genome, which is billions of bits of information, we can actually find the unknown risks that a person may have for that disease. So thank you for Rod. That's very important. So again, we've talked about new drug candidates. We can do that in months, not years. I will add to this real quick by saying is that our value that GATC adds during that development process not only starts with the drug discovery, which is the molecule itself, that's the basis of the drug. It continues through all of the information we're getting and accelerating through the preclinical trials. We also can de-risk the FDA trials because each part of the FDA trial process requires more information, and we have feedback loops which are unique, which continue to make the process smarter and more accurate and less risky for participants as they go along. Okay. Back to the presentation.
All right.
Okay. And then I'm going to move along a little more quickly here. So who benefits? So we've already talked about the pharmaceutical companies, which indirectly would be all of us, because hopefully we can get less expensive drugs that are much more accurate and personalized towards us. We can support the individuals because at the end of our predictive tests, our diagnostics, the individual helps. I mean, how many times have you been to a doctor and been over or under prescribed a medication? The doctors, of course, will aid from this because it gives them more information to make more specific recommendations for their patients. Okay. So I'm just going to skip right over this back to the AI. I think AI is, as we've said, it's a very big. So again, we sit at the very center of these different markets. Genetic testing, which is becoming less and less expensive. Again, we test the entire genome. AI in healthcare, which is inevitable. Personalized medicine, which again is inevitable. We can do that better because we have more insight into the human biology and your human biology in particular at a de-identified way. And then the whole longevity economy. And I
Yeah, we can flip through these pretty quick, Ty. These are just kind of
Go
market
ahead.
size slides.
And just to give you an idea, I mean, just while he's going through this, is that, you know, people that we've been compared to have market caps close to $2 billion. I mean, these are direct competitors. And we actually do what they do better, faster, and less expensive. And yeah, I think we can just skip through that too. Yeah. And we'll just, actually, you just, yeah, there you go. So thank you so much. I'll be available for Q&A at the end of the call.
All right, folks, I'll take over from here. I'm going to leave this page up for just a moment while I go through the details of our Reg A offering. That's what you're on this presentation for today, after all. Again, this is a Reg A Plus offering. The price is $5 per common share of our stock. Right now, we have approximately a $250 million market cap. We've got about 37 million shares issued and outstanding, and then another 12 or 13 in options and warrants. That brings it up to roughly 50 million shares out, fully diluted at $5 a share. It gives us about a $250 million market cap. As Ty was alluding to earlier, companies in our space are regularly valued well north of $1 billion, more commonly $2 billion for AI and drug discovery. And if I could just rattle off a couple of anecdotes here, we had kind of a record-shattering deal go through recently between Sanofi and Exscientia. Exscientia is a drug discovery company using AI. They're probably our closest competitor technologically. Sanofi, which is one of the world's largest drug makers, cut a deal with them for $5.3 billion to deliver 15 new molecules, 15 drug candidates. Now, the details weren't fully disclosed as to how far along the process of development they take these assets. We believe that it's through in vivo or cell line testing, which is what we're doing with a couple of our drugs right now, to be followed by small animal testing.
Jeff, can you unshare the screen, please?
Yeah. My mouse is disappearing here. There we go. So that's really setting the bar rather high. Now that's roughly a $350 billion asset that they're developing, and they're going to do 15 of them. Now, more importantly, they're getting a 23% royalty on those new drugs, which is absolutely groundbreaking. Typically, drug discovery companies that are doing the work that we do would see 1 or 2 points, maybe 3 points if you were really good. A research university maybe commands up to 7 points. Now, Exscientia's got some skin in the game on this, so it's not really an apples to apples comparison, but we think that's the playground that we're playing in right now on the drug discovery side. On the diagnostic side, we've got tremendous opportunities. And one thing that we hadn't really touched on was why are if drug discovery, if coming up with a new medicine is really kind of the brass ring for us, why are we bothering with diagnostics? And we hear that time and again. Our AI platform is fed by data. We have to collect new data specific to a disease state to help train that AI to come up with a cure. If you don't understand the disease, if you don't understand how it affects humans, individuals, then you're never going to come up with a targeted therapeutic. You're just going to come up with a landmine that blows up everything around it. And we've seen that too often in healthcare. So what we're doing is we're working through channel partners to sell these DNA kits. Typically, they're cheek swab DNA kits, but we are also doing some blood samples to assess RNA, analyze RNA or genetic expression to measure that these treatments are doing what we say they're going to do. So the doctors and clinicians know that we're helping these patients in a very specific manner, and they're receiving the benefits that we think that they should, given this course of action. So we're collecting just incredibly valuable data through these distribution partners or channel partners. We've got a deal that Ty's working on. We haven't, some of this stuff is a little bit forward looking, so I will be cautious, but we have a couple of potential transactions that could add over 1 million whole genome samples to our database. Now, we've been told, and I'm not an expert in this necessarily, but we've been told that very few companies even have a 250,000, a 250,000 genetic samples. We could, be at a 4x on that very quickly here in the near future. So the diagnostic side is extremely important. It feeds the AI, and all of this bolsters the valuation of the company. And we think at 250 million in market cap, we don't have a formal third-party valuation. We'll get there. The market's going to tell us soon enough what we're worth, but the competitors are between $1 billion and $2 billion in this space. So we're very humbly valued, I think, conservatively valued, and an excellent opportunity, especially in this kind of rough and tumble market where I don't think anybody was real happy with putting money into this sector 8 or 9 months ago and seeing what a haircut they took in the meantime. So being private is a big advantage for us right now. And what's the exit strategy? I think that everybody here knows that we're heading for, we intend to IPO. We have been in conversations with tier 1 bankers. We think we have chosen a banking partner. It'll probably start with an advisory agreement and work into a banking arrangement for the formal IPO. But the next step after this round of funding for us is to go after an institutional round. That's maybe it's a pharma company or a big fund that plays in our space that's going to take a large bite, a $20 to $50 million bite of the apple here. And that's smart money. That's anybody would feel good following their due diligence into this deal. And that's what we need pre-IPO. So that's the timeline for us. Wrap up this round, continue doing what we're doing with developing these new molecules, these new diagnostic kits, driving revenue through both those channels, and really accelerating the value of this company as we head into what we believe will be an IPO for us.
So I just want to add one caveat to that. Jeff, you included some caveats as well already, but the intent is there. That doesn't mean it can happen. Of course.
Yeah, obviously,
right?
we don't control the NASDAQ. We're at the whim of the underwriter to a large degree, and also market conditions. I mean, I think any reasonable investor would understand those things. Yeah, this is an intention, not a promise. Thanks, Rod.
Yeah, you're welcome. So is that the conclusion of the presentation? In which case we can get into the Q&A.
Yeah, let's hear some questions.
Okay, great. The question I was seeing on the screen there was what's the company's total available market intention? Could you answer that?
That's a massive number. There's hundreds of billions of dollars spent every year in drug development, and as I said before, that process takes 10 to 12 years. So there's trillions of hundreds of billions of market value that's out there that could be disrupted as far as us creating savings. I think the good comparison, as Jeff had mentioned earlier, there's a couple of companies out there that are companies publicly held that are using AI to accelerate drug discovery. And you can look at them, they're anywhere from, I think, 1.8 billion to several $1 billion in market cap.
So yeah, I want to actually go ahead, Jeff.
Oh, no, that's fine.
So I want to clarify. I don't think the company really knows the total available market for what it's doing. So there was a somewhat sarcastic, understandable comment there in the chat box about that. I don't think that there is a precise number that can be put on it, but and when big words like when words like gigantic are used, please bear in mind that that's an internal enthusiasm for a company that's addressing potentially very large markets, but it is general.
Yeah. So if you're talking about total available market is in the hundreds of billions, and that's we're not shooting for the sky. We don't have to be the only player in this space. Schrodinger, Atomwise, Accenture, and Silico, there are a number of strong players who have been in here for a while, and they've raised a lot of money, some cases 500 million, 700 million, and they employ 200 or 300, 400 PhDs and researchers running around their labs doing a lot of the work by hand, because the AI does not do the heavy lifting for them. The AI only gets them so far. We think that we can do the same work with about 10 times less money, which equates to headroom for our investors. So it's not really about market share. There's more than enough to go around. We just have to be agile. We have to prove ourselves to be faster and more effective and win what business we can. And I think it's going to be the kind of thing where we get a few of these big pharma deals under our belt, and we might be priced out of a position of an acquisition. And that puts us in a really strong position to become a service provider to everybody in the industry. Our platform is disease agnostic. It's got tremendous capabilities. A lot of our competitors focus on one disease state or one rare disease or, one little niche, which is fine, but that's not what we do or can do.
So I want to just add to that, because again, in a Reg A Plus, we're dealing with the general public. So please read the risk factors in the offering circular, which are extensive. And, there's risk in any new company, right? And when you look at a gigantic market with all those players in it, there's no guarantee that somebody else isn't doing something just like this right now and about to announce on Thursday. So, this game of investing in private companies is always fraught with risk, no matter how exciting the company is. But I don't want to be too negative, but I want to make sure that you do read the offering circular and look at the risk factors there. There's a request to get the pitch deck sent out. Is it okay, Jeff? Can you?
Absolutely.
We'll do that.
So we can collect emails after the call and from participants, and you can also email us at info@gatchealth.com. That I get copied on that, and I will personally respond with a copy of the investment deck.
And we have the list of people who booked to attend the webinar, and we'll be sending out both a link to the recording of the webinar as well as that presentation. 92% failure rate starting at what stage? Because Ty mentioned the 92% failure rate being normal.
Yeah, that's actually once they get into the FDA process, and traditional companies take years, let's say 5 years. It depends on the drug, just to get up to the FDA phase 1 of the trial. As I said, we can do that in less than a year, it's math. I mean, it's a number much larger than 92%. If you talk about the very beginning, you probably would be better off to measure in single digits the number that actually get through the process. But yeah, 92% is once they get into the FDA process.
What's the minimum investment amount?
I believe the minimum is $250 right now.
Yeah, that's what the logistics have in place.
I like this question. Is there a need for funding to go public? And to me, that's a cash flow question. Jeff, you want to address that? I think that's a really good one relative to our burn.
Yeah, so we have a comparatively very low burn. As I mentioned earlier, we are doing more with less, and that includes staff. We are going to need to staff up as we increase the number of candidate molecules we've got in the preclinical process. So our AI, if you want to think about it this way, our CTO described it in this way: the AI platform is the factory, but every time you ramp up to create a new product, you need a new product line working at the factory. So we need different bioinformaticists and researchers and technicians. So we are going to increase our burn as we grow. We've also been adding to our C-suite and are building out for that to populate our executive staff with folks who have the experience in the public markets. So we're going to ramp up R&D, and a lot of that's going to go towards personnel since we're a tech company. And
so Jeff, question.
Yeah.
I know you've been raising money. How much money has the company raised in recent months? And is there a serious need for capital in order to function for the next year or two? Beyond,
yeah, absolutely.
Beyond what's already been raised, if you could.
Right. So I think to achieve our growth goals, we definitely need to raise money and invest that in R&D, as I was just saying. We've raised to date about $15 million in a Reg D offering that's been running parallel to or preceded the Reg A offering by a bit. We're gonna close that out quickly here, and the Reg A will continue on until we choose to close that, which we have been, to be fair, I think that I should mention that we have been talking to some larger investors who would put in enough money that would cause us to probably wrap this round up before its maximum.
So I guess just one last thing on this, which is the company's survival dependent upon, raising X million dollars in the next 3 months or so?
And no, we've got cash on hand right now that gives us a good long runway. It's just money that we can use to accelerate our growth and grow our valuation.
Good. That's good.
Yeah.
Good clarity. What impact will the current economy have on investments in GATC Health?
Well, I think that's an interesting question. That's just something we're going to have to find out. I think that right now, the public markets are taking a beating. I think people are looking at alternative investments a little bit more closely. I know the bankers that we've been in discussion with think that we're happy to be private right now. And I think that people are always looking to invest in a good idea and a strong team. And that's what we've got. We're revenue positive, and we've got a lot of good work going on right now that should be, we're going to start putting some of these assets up for sale. When do you think, Ty, before the end of the year?
I'm sorry, the drug.
Do you think we're going to start shopping some of these drug assets?
Oh yeah. We've actually started, kind of dangling the line in the water now. I wanted to say something else too, if I may, is that as far as Jeff had mentioned, there's some large investment banks, some of the largest investment banks. We've had several meetings with them in total, and the thing that we're hearing, which is pretty exciting, is because we are a platform and we can add value literally along the entire spectrum from drug discovery through getting the drug into market. They actually believe that we could provide a potential lift to these biotech companies that have been hurting, because we can work with very large and very small and everybody in between that is involved in the science of drug discovery and personalized medicine. So as Jeff has said, our platform, we literally just are finishing the next rev of this AI platform. And next year, conservatively, we'll be able to discover 6 new potential drugs. Each potential drug has a value of potentially $1 billion or more.
But you can't predict that. That's potential, if, maybe, right? All the normal caveats.
Yep, I use the word potential.
I know you do. I know, pardon me.
Yeah.
So then there's a question here about 23andMe and how companies will get consumers to give their rights to any benefits that come from the drug discovery process.
Yeah. Let me address that one. We get that one a lot, and I get it. And it goes back to the whole reason why when I was at First Americans Health, I wanted to work with GATC. So GATC doesn't work directly with consumers and collect their personal identifiable information and derive value directly from the consumer data. We work with third parties that have a personal service relationship with the individual. So that individual is providing their biological data to that provider, whether it be a doctor or pharmacy or whoever, and they're getting something in return for that exchange. And that provider, that distributor, if you will, is the one that has the contractual relationship to protect that personal identifiable information. All we're receiving, I shouldn't say all, but what we're receiving from those distributors we're working with is de-identified information. So we're receiving information that we don't know who you are, We have no way of contacting you back to this information, and the individual is getting the value from the provider that they're exchanging the information with. Very special way that, honestly, if someone doesn't have a business model like this, I don't know how they're going to get through the quagmire of consumer privacy issues.
There's a question here. There's a few IPO questions that you can't answer, but one is what amount is necessary in fundraising to be ready to go public?
I think it has less to do with the amount raised than it does where that money comes from. We can, myself and my partners have a long history in fundraising, and we can do so effectively for indefinitely. If we wanted to self-fund this project, we probably could. What we need in order to go public is this kind of stake horse investor, somebody from within the industry betting their money on our success. A strategic investor is most likely a pharma partner, a research partner, or a fund that specializes in drug discovery or advanced diagnostics. We are talking to several venture funds at large pharma companies right now. We're in discussions through some banking relationships with large manufacturers that are looking to get into diagnostics. So that would qualify for kind of this smart money investment. And it doesn't have to be a bunch, maybe 20 million. And that would put us in a position it's just another step of validation, right? So we've got technical validation where other tech companies kick our tires, or there's peer-reviewed publications, documentation of our work. But then there's financial validation, and that's people who have done the due diligence, who know this space, who are willing to invest a significant amount in our company. So the amount's not quite as important. We don't need to bring in a PE group and get 500 million or anything like that.
Yeah, the other thing I would add is that literally to go public, the company has to have enough numerical count of investors to do so. So,
we do.
Minimum of 300 to go to the NASDAQ, 400 is better, and more than that's much better. So that's where the Reg A Plus comes in handy.
That's an excellent point. Thanks, Rod. Yes, absolutely.
Everyone's muted because we can't take verbal discussions. It would be a little bit too hard to handle that. Timeline for public, we can't discuss it. We don't know what the time would be. I say we, the company can't know that. Yes, $500. Jeff stated the minimum is $250.
Ron, I can take this question. I think.
Yeah, go ahead. You guys can answer them.
What percentage of investment monies go to the sales group versus going to operations and development? Great question, because that speaks to our model. So the sales and marketing part of our budget is in the single percentage points. And here's why. We have an advisory board that is unbelievable. Patrick Lilly, who's the CEO of Liquid Biosciences, he's a very close partner of ours. His technology and our technology actually share information to get smarter. He doesn't compete with us. He's kind of at the beginning of the food chain, if you will. He has direct contractual relationships with 9 of the top 10 pharmaceutical companies in the world. And he's been phenomenal about helping us set up those arrangements. As I said, Preetam Wadhwa, who's a chief medical officer, 17 years with one of the larger pharmaceutical companies in the world, Amgen, and the list goes on and on. So we have advisors with the right C-level connections at the right businesses who are under the hood seeing what we're doing, and they are at the right time making the right introductions with the right information to the right companies.
So please continue answering the questions yourselves. I think there's so many of them. I'm slowing it down.
Yeah, I would also add to that, there is cost of money going on in Manhattan Street Capital's disclosed what their fee schedule is, and you can read up on that on their website too. So, it's not free to use Rod's platform here, and it shouldn't be. It's very valuable to us.
And all the marketing, the marketing expense and other expenses to draw in
Correct.
investors.
Oh, there was a question here about telehealth. and it's a huge business. You're absolutely right. Telehealth is a huge business, and it's not going to get smaller. We would not be in the telehealth business. Again, we're not going to work directly with the end user, but we are working with and will work with companies who have telehealth and mobile solutions. And it's a perfect opportunity as a way for us to share the health information and diagnostics and predictive information with through the distributor to the consumer.
You know, and if I could just dive into to get a little bit more granular, one thing that we haven't touched on is a discovery we've made. Everybody's familiar with those little cassette-style COVID tests. They're called a lateral flow assay. They're like a pregnancy test, a little plastic cassette. We've developed what we think is going to be the first predictive tool for type 2 diabetes using one of these. It's just a finger prick, blood drop kind of test. And what's unique about it and why it ties into telemedicine is that it is shelf stable at normal temperatures for up to 6 months. Now, right now, similar tests have maybe a 15 to 30 minute effective lifespan. So you have to do it in a doctor's office. It has to be scanned in a laser scanner right there. Ours is completely stable. So you can treat people in remote locations or underserved communities by mail. You can mail tests or deliver them to a community center or a remote clinic, and they can be mailed back in days, weeks, months later and scanned pretty much anywhere using a $500 laser scanner. And we can tell you with a degree of accuracy that's 100 times greater than anything that's on the market before, what your future risk of developing type 2 diabetes is. We're using this same technology to create lateral flow assays for oncology diagnostics. So some of the work that we're doing on the diagnostic side, whether it's a predictive tool like the diabetes or a straight binary diagnostic, yes, no, in the case of the cancer tests, that will greatly support the expansion of telehealth, you know, particularly in areas where it's very difficult to get people to the testing sites or the test to the people. So we do have a play.
Jeff, one of the questions that came in before is, what's the company's philosophy about the cost of drugs in the US? And, you know, what literally that?
Well, I mean, it's ridiculous. You know, we're paying for failure.
Yeah.
You know, as Ty was saying, 90+% once it enters the FDA trial, our competitors can get a pile of maybes of drug candidates down to, well, the best of them down to about 150, 130, and we can hand over the exact right asset or assets. That's the AI gap. That's what we're closing. And that's a tremendous improvement over the 5,000 or 10,000, a traditional model that we're still paying for, by the way. Every time you buy, you pay for a prescription, you're paying for the traditional model that was only able to get it down to maybe 10,000 maybes. And then it's got to go through all the very expensive and time-consuming handwork to get it to find the one that they take into FDA trials where 9 out of 10 fail. So it's ridiculous. We really think that by getting more drug candidates to market quickly and more cost effectively can drive down the cost of drugs. Now, we're not a drug maker. That's not our margin. That's not our decision, but we are able to get it up to that point cheaper, faster, and with drugs that are more focused and more effective and we think safer than drugs discovered using different methodologies.
So there's a lot of questions about timing of IPO. What's the blocking factor? Why not do it now? Can you talk about it very briefly and then we'll wrap?
Jeff, I can talk about the operational piece and maybe you talk about the market.
Sure.
Because I'm reading the threads too, and I'm looking into that question. I think it probably has to do, what are the things that we need to do to prove our value? Because at the end of the day, whether it's an IPO, an acquisition, or producing revenue, we've got steps to prove. That's what operations are all about. So as I said before, we have through the process from discovering the molecules to getting a drug to the FDA through the FDA process. So we've discovered these molecules, which can be the basis of new drugs. We are in preclinical trials, which means pre-FDA process. This is where you're actually working with cell culture and eventually animals, small animals. And we're in the process of working with a major university, which we have yet to name, for the animal trials, and that will actually be into that by the end of the summer, beginning of fall. We have a tremendous amount of data leading into that. We're working with these amazing advisors who are helping us make sure that we're crossing the T's, dotting the I's on all of our research along the way. So anyone from the outside can look at this objectively and say, yes, compared to what else is out there, you're much more effective, efficient, better outcomes. We will not be taking, well, we don't believe we're going to be taking these drugs into the FDA process. That's not our business model. That's a tremendous cost, and there's companies that do this all the time. We will actually be developing these drug assets, getting them into the preclinical trials, and as Jeff said, we'll be partnering with other pharmaceutical companies who have experience in the FDA process, and then we will share. They will pay us upfront costs and tiered costs based on reaching certain milestones, and give us a percentage of the back end in terms of royalty. So our sequence of events is prove that our AI does what scientists believe it does by getting these drugs through preclinical, working with various size pharmaceutical companies to partner with them to have them look under the hood and create a deal whereby they're validating that what we do has value. And then we have shown that our platform can do that many, many times every year. So it's scaling this process, which we're in right now, to where we can do that with other pharmaceutical companies. And Jeff, I'll jump back to you.
Sure. So specifically, if we're talking about milestones, pre-IPO milestones, which boxes do we need to tick? We could, there's nothing stopping us from going public today. We could file an S1 and just go for it. But I think that it would be most advantageous to our shareholders for us to see what happens with that first molecule that makes it through small animal trials. Now, most of the companies that are in our space don't go into small animals. From what we understand, they'll go through cell culture testing as a means to validate the efficacy of their drug, but they don't go into safety, which is really what the small animals show. Is this going to be a safe drug that you can take into FDAs into humans? So that's probably toward the end of this year. We'll get to that step, and we'll take a good hard look at what we need beyond that. I mentioned that we would like to have that investment from an institutional investor under our belt pre-IPO too. We have conversations in the works right now, obviously. I can't speak to, if or when that's going to happen, when a deal like that might close, but we have every confidence that we will be able to secure one or more. And with those two things, we think that we're in a good position to really start looking at the market, but that's going to be determined largely by our banking partner. Whoever the underwriter is going to really have their hand on the wheel regarding timing. That's going to be conditional on market conditions, which right now, I don't know. Do you want to be the one shining star over the turmoil, or do you want to wait until things calm down and people can take a breath? So, I think the only accurate answer is we don't know. We'd like to go quickly and cautiously at the same time.
So let me
maximize value for the shareholders.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks, guys. I want to re-emphasize that all these. It's understandable to get the questions on the IPO front. You can't instantly do that, and it does, as Jeff said, it depends on the market environment at the time and what the underwriters think and so forth. So please recognize the risks that are inherent there. Read the offering circular, read all the risk factors there. If you'd like to invest, the URL is posted in here. The offering circular is posted in the chat box. You can go to the company website and go to invest, start and process there. But again, make sure you read the offering circular and are fully aware of it. Jeff gave his email earlier. Perhaps you could put it in the chat box again right now, Jeff. Type in the email for people to send queries to you. We will be following up with a recording of this webinar, as well as an attachment, which will be the presentation that you've seen. Again, you know, I am concerned because there's so many interesting things going on in the company and so many pointed questions about the IPO front. Nothing is guaranteed, right? Life's, you know, there's risks everywhere you look and no guarantees of success anywhere. Please bear all those types of concerns in mind. And now I'll switch to saying thank you. Thanks to the audience for being here. Really appreciate your involvement and the questions. Thanks, Jeff and Ty, for an excellent presentation. Thanks, Akash, for making this happen. And again, remember, I'm not recommending an investment. I'm facilitating this discussion in order to get as much fact on the table as possible, so potential investors have a full deck of cards with which to assess the merit or lack thereof for you putting your money at risk. So I'm going to wrap up now and close the meeting. This is, I appreciate everyone's involvement. Thank you. Look forward to.
Thanks so much, Rod.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thanks, guys.